by this newspaper, social science textbooks have undergone 3 rounds of editing since 2017. This fact reminds that these deletions speak of a certain kind of approach to textbook pedagogy and politics. The violence against Muslims in Gujarat in 2002 falls into this category. But then, curiously, the discussion on emergency has also been taken out of the book in purely tactical terms. This could be calculated deletion to keep the Congress quietly by an unstated quid pro quo. We delete all what we do not want, but we also delete what you may not want. In any case, the deletion are not merely about what government or ruling party don't like to be mentioned. They are more about formulating social science textbooks and in fact the idea of social science itself. In this sense, the deletion also indicate the deep suspicion of social science among the power holders and their attempts to reformulate these disciplines and not just to change the textbook. Social scientists are facilitators of critical thinking about students and readers. Rulers uncomfortable with critical thinking seeks to restructure and the social sciences. The current bout of deletion needs to be understood from this perspective. The idea seems to be that by about mentioning some inconvenient facts, the regime can not only run away from the reality but more importantly also ensure that students do not develop the critical faculty to look at the society and politics. This could be a large purpose behind deleting the sections of Gujarat violence and emergency. The same logic applies to other two major deletions. The mention of caste injustice as a part of India's social reality and discussion of protest movements as a vital part of India's democracy. The first strategy is heavy governmental control over the curricula and textbook and emphasis on avoidance. The bout of deletion represents this strategy. In India, all governments have resorted to it. By deleting sentences and chapters, the government seeks to avoid students from being introduced to certain processes. In this political sciences, this pertains to Gujarat violence in history textbook. It pertains to Mughal rulers. The avoidance is on display in deleting the discussion on Gujarat violence. Both the emergency and Gujarat violence mark the failure of multiple institutions. Are these not important moments that students studying Indian politics should be introduced to? Answer for the present regime seems to be in a negative. Parenthetically, the deletion of section on Gujarat violence marks an admission that there is something about episode in 2002 that needs to be hidden from the public domain. Instead of allowing students to comprehend a caste as a system of injustice, the deletion seeks to prevent an ideal and imagined Indian Hindu system in which the caste is only a marginal or slight distortion. Therefore, dropping the chapters on emergency is not merely a short-term political move, but a decision informed by a broader perspective that the citizens needs to be regulated heavily because the nation state represents all wisdoms. The deletion of the section fits well with the goal of reframing the relation between the authority and the citizen. Similarly, in case of the chapters on protest movements, and the purpose is to formulate the idea of democracy. Democracy involves not merely the competition but also struggles and popular protest. In this sense, democracy is a messy affair, but underneath that mess, there is also an innate capacity to challenge all powers. This is exactly what rationalized textbook seeks to avoid desperately. Next article is BRICS about after Ukraine. The leader of BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, will navigate the crucial dilemma of evolving a common stance on Ukraine-Russia conflict. The major distraction from this primary agenda of rebalancing an international system dominated by the West or the geopolitical consideration of its member come in a way of attaining drooping original goals. The answer to these questions lies in the way of BRICS adapts to new reality. The current predicament could be an opportunity to challenge the existing dominated by unilateralism and exclusion. Economically and militarily, technologically, socially, culturally, BRICS nations represents a powerful bloc. They have an estimated combined population of 3.23 million people, which is over 40% of world's population. They accounts for over more than quarter of world's land area over the 3 continents, and for more than 25% of global GDP. The grouping comprises 2 of the fastest growing nations, India and China. BRICS members could be potential target of the kind of economic warfare deployed by the West against Russia. It is the time that BRICS and other like-minded countries rigorously work towards creation of parallel economic bloc that does not rely on US-led institutions. The West has so far not expected the BRIC countries to stringently adhere to its sanctions against Russia, but it will naive to expect that they will persist with this attitude. Can BRICS withstand with the economic and institutional might of the West? It has proved its mettle to an extent by establishing BRICS new development bank and contingency reserve arrangement. However, despite the group comprising China, India, Russia, intra-BRICS trade accounts for less than 20% of global trade, and BRICS is far from having its own payment mechanism, international messaging system, or COTS. Initiatives such as a nation new development bank should have by now given some competition to Western lenders, challenging the economic might of West in the near future might be close to impossible. Creating financial mechanism and technological institutions could turn BRICS into G20 for developing nations. It's time to revisit the idea of expanding grouping by inviting new members. This could also impart a new vigor to BRICS development goals. China is vital for the success of any future BRICS endeavor. The border conflict has created a mistrust of China in India. In current situation, New Delhi is unlikely to take anti-West stance. In India, unlike China, is neither UN Security Council member nor does it have a major sticking point with West. The emergence of an alliance of nations in the global South that breaks the West's hegemony could be a game changer in the geopolitics. Ukraine crisis could be an occasion for the leaders of BRICS nation to commit themselves to the original goal of the bloc. Next article that we are moving into is related to heart attack related deaths in Mumbai, spike and why. The article talks about deaths attributed to heart attack in Mumbai, period between 2019-2021. Deaths 5,000 to 17,000 increased in 2021. Monthly averages around 2,000 starting from 400 in the 2019. The article talks about the deaths attributed to heart attack rose sixfold during the second wave of pandemic at monthly average of nearly 3,000 during the Jan to June 2021 compared to an average of less than 500 across 2020. Sometimes when can a death attributed to a heart attack? Sometimes the flow of blood is blocked by cholesterol plaque forming in the arteries. In a heart attack, the blockage ruptures and cholesterol material oozes and meets the patient's blood, which can lead to clotting in the ruptured area. Due to this clot, the blood flow in the artery is completely cut off from the heart, leading to heart attack. If the patient had a history of poor heart health or ejection fraction below 40, then the death can attribute to heart attacks. If these are not possible, the postmortem can determine if a heart attack caused death. Even during the second wave, medical colleges performed autopsies on suspected heart attack patients after conducting a COVID-19 diagnosis test when the clinical evidence of heart attack was not available. In the postmortem examination, blockages in the heart arteries and clots on ruptured blockage can confirm death due to heart attack. What explains the spike in Mumbai? Cited three broad reasons: possibility of development of thrombosis among the recovered COVID-19 patients, delay in diagnosis of heart illness amid the pandemic, and better recording of data. Secondly, since the start of pandemic, the medical practitioners are more conscious in segregation of type of death, so it was possibly helped to maintain a better data related to heart attacks. Also, during the second wave, many patients avoided hospital due to the fear of contracting COVID-19. Could lifestyle changes be a factor? Life has become more sedentary with lesser options of socialization and physical activities. Sugar and cholesterol levels are going haywire, along with weight gain. During the second wave, a lot of people were under stress. All these are also contributed to this rise in heart attacks. Doctors have observed Indians have a genetic predisposition, smaller coronary arteries, diet patterns with the excess consumption of trans fat and sedentary lifestyle that puts them in a huge risk of category of heart attacks. What puts recovered COVID-19 patients at a higher risk of heart attacks? It has been observed that SARS-CoV-2 damages the heart and blood vessels, which leads to clot, heart inflammation, arrhythmias, and heart failure. COVID-19 typically causes inflammation of endothelium, that is inner lining of vascular structures in the body, including the arterial and venous system. What should be done to understand this trend further? If these patients has no history of past or present COVID infection and died purely due to cardiac complication, then causes could be the major lifestyle changes, additional distress, or any clinical anomaly yet to be analyzed. Next article talking about Can reducing nicotine content cut addiction, smoking, death? US Food and Drug Administration plans to require tobacco companies to slash the amount of nicotine in the traditional cigarettes to make them less addictive and reduce the toll of smoking. Hurdles. The experts said determined smokers might still seek to buy high nicotine cigarettes on illegal markets or across borders in Mexico and Canada. Also, FDA could likely have to overcome the options from tobacco industry, which was begun pointing out the reasons the agency cannot upend a $80 billion market. Available option. Low nicotine cigarettes are already available to the consumer, albeit in a limited fashion. Next article talks about Maharashtra's crisis. What now? What is the anti-defection law and would it apply to Sena rebels? Anti-defection law provides for disqualification of MLA after being elected on the ticket of political party voluntarily give up their political party's membership. Indicates whether they have left their party. The MLA's conduct can indicate whether they have left their party. The law is also applicable to independent MLAs. They are prohibited from joining a political party. In case they do so, they can also lose their membership in the legislature. But the anti-defection law does not apply if the members of MLA who leave the political party constitute 2/3 of the party's strength in the legislature. Excuse me. These MLAs can emerge with another party or become a separate group in the legislature. How does 2/3 rule work in the current situation in Maharashtra? And it is the assembly speaker who decides whether MLA has left a party or group that constitute 2/3 of the party. Article 180 Class 1 of the Constitution states that Deputy Speaker performs the Speaker's duties when office is vacant. He has to follow the rules of Maharashtra legislature that lays down the process under anti-defection law. Anti-defection law applies in this case. First, any MLA of the assembly can petition Zirwal, that is, certain MLAs have defected from their political party. Such a petition has to accompanied by documentary evidences. Deputy Speaker would then forward the petition to MLA against whom their colleges are making charge of the defection. In either case, the speakers will decide the matter after hearing all parties, which could take time. How much time does it usually take? In recent years, one of the fastest decision in the defection proceeding was delivered by Rajya Sabha Chairman Venkaiah Naidu. The months have in state legislature defection petition have taken much longer. For example, 2020 Supreme Court used extraordinary power to remove the Manipur minister from his position, but whether the speaker decides quickly or take time, decision is usually challenged in a court, which further delays the decision. Both Venkaiah Naidu and Supreme Court have recommended that the speakers decide on the defection cases in 3 months. What is governor's role? Governor has a crucial role when there is a political instability in a state. Before 1994, governor were quick to dismiss a state government and charging that it could not have a majority in the state legislature and recommending the imposition of president's rule in the state. But the Supreme Court ended this practice in the judgment in S.R. Bommai case in 1994. In this landmark case, the court ruled that the place for deciding whether a government has lost its majority as a legislature, the Maharashtra Governor Bhagat Singh Kaushari can ask the Chief Minister Yadav Thackeray to convene the assembly and prove the majority on the floor of the house. Next article talks about what the attempt to designate JUD Maki means for India, US and Pakistan. The article talks about last week China placed a hold on joint proposal by India and US to designate under UN Security Resolution 1267 Abdul Rahman Maki, brother-in-law of Hafiz Saeed, the founder of the terrorist organization Lashkar-e-Taiba. The resolution 1267 provides for sanction against individuals and entities that supports for finance acts or activities of ISIL, Al-Qaeda, associated individual groups, undertakings, entities, LET, that is Lashkar-e-Taiba and its proxy Jamatul Dawa, Hafiz Saeed, Jaish-e-Mohammed and his head Masood Azhar are listed under Resolution 1267. But after his speech that threatening violence in India, he earned a place in US Treasury Department list of designated and sanctioned terrorists in November 2010. Bounty of $2 was offered for information about him. That did not send him to hiding. New attempts. India US move to designate Maki has come at a time when FATF is considered removing Pakistan from grey list after an on-site inspection later this year. This follows an improvement in ties between US and Pakistan after exit of Imran Khan government. New Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto visited Washington in May and met Secretary of State Anthony Blinken after a long drought of in US-Pakistan ties. Pakistan continued political commitment to combating both terrorist financing and money laundering has led to significant progress. For India, the continuous grey listing of Pakistan since 2018 has a huge propaganda victory and played well to domestic galleries. From the same gallery, Pakistan's likely removal from the grey list is bound to be seen as diplomatic setback for India. Beijing's technical hold, which means a proposal cannot come up for another 6 months, it is also useful. It has shown up China once again as having double strands on terrorism, as unmanned Indian officials have said in remarks to India. Next article is all about destruction in the province of Patika, eastern Afghanistan. Disaster only compounds the misery in Afghanistan, which is already deep, one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with millions of facing increasing hunger, poverty, after cutting off of international financing to Taliban. Russia nears full control of Lushank rain rockets of Kharkiv, killing 20. Finland has prepared for decades for a Russian attack, would put if stiff resistance should one occur. Its armed forces chief said Nordic countries have built up a substantial arsenal. Lankan economy has collapsed, can't buy oil. Prime Minister. Sri Lankan debt-laden economy has collapsed after the Sri Lankan debt-laden economy has collapsed after months of shortage of food, fuel, electricity. As the economy founders under the weight of heavy debt, lost terrorism revenue and other impacts from pandemic, as well as surging cost for commodities. The foreign currency crisis has crimped imports, creating severe shortage of food, fuel, electricity and other essentials such as medicine, forcing peoples to stand in line to obtain the basic needs. That's all. If in one more article that is related to economy, high inflation major concern to moderate by next fiscal RBI. High inflation continues to be the major concern. The time is appropriate to go for a further increase in the policy rate to effectively deal with the inflation and inflation expectation, according to the minutes of Monetary Policy Committee meeting held on June. Monetary Policy Committee, which hiked the policy repo rate by 50 basis points to tame the inflation in its meeting, has committed to bringing down the inflation to the RBI's tolerance level. Virtual digital asset norms laid down for tax reduction. One is with the introduction of section 194S in the Income Tax Act through Financial Act 2022. A tax deducted at source of 1% will be levied on transformation of VDAs effective from July 1 if the value transaction exceeds 10,000 in a year. VDA means virtual digital assets. For example, in case of transfer of virtual digital asset takes place on a or through an exchange, and the virtual digital asset being transferred is not owned by exchange, tax may be deducted by the exchange making the payment to the seller. However, in case of payment between the seller and the exchange is being done through a broker, the responsibility to deduct tax shall be on both exchange and the broker. Virtual transfer of virtual digital asset takes place on or through an exchange, and the virtual digital asset being transferred is owned by the exchange, and the primary responsibility to deduct the tax remains with the buyer or his broker. As well as an alternative to the exchange may be enter into written agreement with the buyer or his broker that in regard all the transaction the exchange would be paying the tax on or before the due date of that quarter. For example, if the two different cryptocurrencies, say Bitcoin and Ethers, are being exchanged, both the person could be considered buyers as well as sellers. Therefore, both will need to pay tax with respect to the transfer of cryptocurrency. That's all about the article. If you like the video, please do share, like, comment and subscribe. Thank you.